With the Nightreign Network tests now at an end and roughly 15 hours of playtime later, I think it's a good time to share my opinions and expectations for the full release. Now, if the product of what I just played was the full game or even most of the game, it would definitely not be good. But keeping in mind that this is a demo and that their previous network tests have been short, the Elden Ring Network test only gave us roughly half of Limgrave to explore, and based on the file size, there is obviously a lot of game that we don't know about, which is kind of annoying that no one has even stated how much of the game we actually got to play. At least for Elden Ring, they told us a rough percentage, because all it does is have people critique it as if it's an almost finished product, when this demo itself is actually months old with no Shadow of the Erdtree weapons, and they're using day one patch of Elden Ring when it comes to the weapon movesets. So I'm going to try and keep that in mind when talking about this network test, and yeah, that's where I'm going to start, the network. Yeah, the first day was absolutely horrid with all the disconnects, but the next few days it started to stabilize as I did disable passwords. Now the fact that it still happened is concerning, especially when the other network tests didn't suffer from this, and there was arguably just as much online activity. But like, how is it that From Software in 2025 that are like 15 games deep in some type of online interactivity still have horrendous netcoding and performance issues? Like, especially now since Elden Ring being released, they sold tens of millions of copies of not just that game, but other Souls games too. Like, you ain't some small niche dev team anymore. So my expectations, if you're deciding to make a multiplayer focused game, I'm expecting you're going to really hone in on fixing one of your biggest weaknesses. So hopefully this network test is a big wake up call to get this right for the release. I'm not too familiar with the technicality, but whatever it takes, whether it be dedicated servers or not, something gotta give, especially if you're going to have deflecting types of classes and lots of parrying abilities. People don't want to be experiencing lag on top of those things. Now, I was really excited for this game, and I still very much am. There is a lot to like, but I feel like there's a lot more that I'm wishing happens for the full game. The biggest reason I was excited about this game to begin with is that they're making a game with pure Souls combat, not having to focus on making many new levels, bosses, armor, even that much lore. Also, there's going to be no PvP, so this is their best opportunity to go hard with the combat. Just make the best possible combat that the Souls formula can offer to give this generation a proper send-off so we can move in a different direction. And from what I've seen, there is more to be desired, but it's completely fixable. The funny thing is, the worst part about the network test is that the boss selection was dog shit, and Souls combat in its purest form is reacting to enemy movesets, so if your enemies suck, then your combat takes a hit too. So I would like to see some more bosses that people actually like be in heavy rotation. But as for the positives, the fast pace of the combat is fantastic, the climbing, the surge sprint, the unique movesets that each class gets feel somewhat on par with some of the Shadow of the Erdtree weapon movesets, the unique passive effects that you get throughout the game that could also enhance things like your dodge or have unique AoEs for certain attacks are great. Also, the character abilities feel fantastic, they have quick cooldowns, the ultimates getting infinite iframes is good, they also have great skill expression, especially with the Wilder. This class is done perfectly, and I hope the other 4 classes that we have yet to see are on par or better. Now, when it comes to the things that I wish were better, the major one being is honing in on the classes feeling more distinct. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is giving more unique movesets to the classes. Like how the Duchess gets a cool dagger combo, the Wilder gets a cool greatsword combo. They need to be given more weapon types that have these obvious enhanced movesets. Like when they pick up a certain weapon, they just get the direct upgrade. That would make the game feel more fast-paced, give these classes something more obvious to build around, because as it stands right now, I'm just going to pick the best weapon available no matter what, and not really think about what might synergize well with not only the abilities of my character, but also the aesthetic of the character. So things that I would like to see is the Duchess get a faster moveset or unique movesets to lighter types weapons like claws or straight swords, the Wilder getting a boost to curved greatswords or maybe even twin blades too, the Guardian getting a boost to great spears and heavy thrusting swords, and maybe having the Recluse just get like a passive casting speed increase. Also, with the Recluse or just spell casting in general, I'm glad that we don't have to do any more toggling between 10 different spells, but it would be nice if the UI for the spells helped me understand which button is for which spell on the actual screen itself. And I feel like the casting-based classes should have the ability to hold many spells and use like a wheel or a shortcut to cast them instead, because we still have to hold many staves and still switch between them, which can be annoying. Using spells on the Recluse should not feel the same as it does with the other classes, nor how it does in the base game. I guess I am just like projecting this defined roles of classes a bit too hard, but that's just the fun of having dedicated classes in my opinion, having them all feel very different to play, which actually helps with the replay value. And that's what I'm going to touch on next. Now, this one is going to be the hardest to talk about because in a network test, they want to test the network and they're not going to really give us much actual content. In a roguelike game, the biggest thing is the procedural generated areas that make it be that no two runs are the exact same. But in this demo, they didn't really include that. There was some RNG involved, like when it came to the items, the spawn point, the end of day bosses, but that's basically it. All the enemies and their locations were basically the same. There were like no unique environmental interactions or events going on outside of like a bunch of ends spawning in or Morgoths randomly invading you, which was definitely the coolest part about the network test in my opinion. So if the actual randomized parts were the most fun, then I'm not too concerned when it comes to the replay value. Like yes, even if there is only 8 day 3 bosses for the full release, if they add a whole bunch more unique interactions for every run, have random stuff spawn in for these empty areas of the map, then I believe we're going to have a very replayable game on our hands, especially when it comes to the relic system, which this, probably more so than anything else, is going to make or break the replay value if you're someone that cares about build creation or constant progression. Typically with roguelikes, you don't really take anything with you to carry over to the next playthrough, and if you do, it's only something small, but these relic buffs that you get at the end of every single run can make the build creation very interesting. And if you've been reading some of these things, they have some very unique types of effects, and there's been some that offer great synergy. And the fact that every class does have different relic slots, I also appreciate. Now, my biggest concern is if it turns into like this Bloodborne blood gem type of situation, because it is a very similar system that I don't doubt that it took direct inspiration off. You have these randomized drops at the end of an activity that have randomized perks that you can only equip into certain slots. Now, the problem is that they're random, so you could be working towards getting a certain relic with certain effects and then just never get it. But one thing that I'm hoping, and that it seems like that we will get, is the ability to buy relics or maybe change up their effects with the currency that we obtain by selling them. It's either that, or this currency is used to buy skins for our characters, which hopefully that actually makes some really cool looking skins. Now, one thing that is actually important, and probably the most important thing when it comes to this game, is the pacing, which is kind of a combination of things I've already talked about, but some parts throughout the network test, I was doing lots of like unnecessary running through empty areas, but I imagine I'll be doing a lot less of this once the full game comes around with more in-game events and more map knowledge. But for the positives of the pacing, I like the timing of the days. You have enough time to make a solid loadout and beat bosses with relative ease. The ability to quickly level up and pick up items is seamless. The amount of item drops with cool abilities that are littered throughout the entire game make it that you have a nice sense of progression and gets more powerful outside of just leveling up. Being able to open up the map in combat, having these hawks take you from one part of the map to the other. The abundance of consumables is very pleasing. Like when the RNG just hits right, you get all these abilities that synergize perfectly, and then you just feel untouchable. It's like literally peak gaming. Game knowledge is highly rewarded in this game, which I love. Now, as for the downsides of the pacing, the game forcing you to run to the edges of the map to visit these churches so we can get some more healing flasks. Like, this is arguably the most important item in the game, so it kind of feels like we have to pick them up, which having set locations for an important item is not something a roguelike should be doing. So I would much rather have these be unlocked by killing like an X amount of bosses instead, or having the churches spawn not just at the edge of the map. Also, the bosses that they choose sometimes can just be tedious for the time constraints. Like, we'd rather fight cool bosses from any game in the Soul series instead of 4 Lendel Knights, these stupid head thingies, a fucking flower, a stupid dragon that takes forever to kill because everything in this game has stupid amounts of poise, which is another thing. The weapons in Elden Ring are balanced around the stance breaking system, and it feels virtually impossible to get one in this game. It literally just makes large weapons just feel more useless, especially with how shit the damage can be sometimes, because for some reason, we are expected to pick up many different weapons, but we get next to no smithing stones to upgrade them. In my opinion, smithing stones should just be deleted from this game. It should only require runes to level up, because it's not like we can actually upgrade them at any point in the game. We have to be at certain locations, and having them just be upgraded with runes, even if they make it really expensive, would help the game flow faster, help us kill more bosses to level up faster, and help unlock more weapons like legendaries. Like, if some runs can become tedious very easily, then it will definitely hurt the replay value. Nobody likes doing shit damage. People want to use legendary weapons. We don't want to run from one side of the map to the other just to get a decent amount of flasks. We don't want to fight shit bosses, especially reskinned ones. Like, let us be powerful, stop being safe in a small side project game where there's no PvP and there's nothing to lose. Now, as for the actual multiplayer experience itself, I don't really have much positive to say. Like, the core of it is fine. You play Elden Ring with your friends, you can't really go wrong. The classes all do cover different playstyles, so there is some synergy, which is cool. The UI is not that bad. It shows players' health, whether they go down, if they're in the storm, if you're the last player alive. But everything else about the multiplayer features is like, why? Actually, not even why, more like why not? Why don't we have crossplay? Why no text chat? Why no voice chat? Why don't we have a good pinging system that tells allies when you see a boss or something, or even just having a collection of generated messages to choose from? And the funny thing is the characters literally have voice lines at the round table, so all you have to do is have them read like 20 lines, just going over stuff like, there's a weapon over here, or like, I've been downed, here is a boss, let's go this way. It would have been pretty cool. And there are some things that do have a chance of being in the full game, but knowing FromSoft, they will just not even bother, like having a leaderboard, having a competitive mode, having a website for people that want to look for groups. Like the multiplayer features is like another area where they're just being a bit too safe in, and not really like doing too much to try and experiment. Also, another opinion that I have that is probably an unpopular one. I don't like how you can have multiple of the same class in a group. Like if the game wants to incentivize team building, then they should not have it to where teams can have like 3 duchesses running around spamming the same time ability to fuck everything up. Because I can guarantee there'll end up being a meta that works something like that, and it'll end up being nerfed to the point that the character will just be shit by itself. Like I don't know, it's not the most necessary thing, but I just prefer to have good team composition. Now, if you're a person that wants to play Nightreign solo and you have no interest in the multiplayer at all, I would wait until the full release to find out more, because I literally have no confidence that the solo play will be that accessible. Even if they balance boss health and lower the poise for solo play, when it comes to things like the enemy distribution, how quickly you can traverse the map, the time constraints, literally dying once in a boss would just end the run, all these things would make it that the solo play is for the top 1% of players. And I don't think they're going to go out of the way to balance bosses or design bosses for solo play when the game is balanced for multiplayer. It's basically going to be the equivalent of players complaining about weapons being too broken in PvP, and then people will respond like, it's not a PvP game, the PvE comes first. This is basically the same thing. It's not a solo game, the multiplayer comes first. But yeah, that's basically everything I wanted to cover. I'm pretty confident that the game will do well. There's always going to be some things that I wish they would add, but that's just natural. If you're a person that is still on the fence about buying it, I would just wait for the full product first. But I am looking forward to making lots of content with this game, because some of the build creation with all the ability synergy, the relic system, it's all very exciting to me. I honestly might make some videos based on the stuff from what I've played already. So definitely do subscribe for that, and I'll catch you guys around. Bye.